When you see some next-level special effects, it can be a magical moment. So when you rewatch these scenes, you expect to have that same wonder ignited within you. But this isn't always the case. When you give some classic films another go, you'll notice the visuals aren't as great as you remember. At one point, these moments were impressive, even jaw-dropping. But it's time to take off the rose-tinted glasses and see these eyesores for what they really are. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with Whatculture here with 10 groundbreaking movie special effects that aged terribly. Number 10. Poltergeist. Poltergeist has so many mind-blowing special effects, it's baffling how it didn't win any Oscars, although it did lose out to E.T. But after 40 years, you'd assume a lot of these visuals would be pretty ropey nowadays. Amazingly, most of these optical tricks still look top-notch. The way the house collapses into itself is one of the coolest visuals of the 1980s. The elongated corridor sequence is just as mesmerizing now as it was when Poltergeist was released. But there's one scene that has aged worse than Mickey Rourke. When the parents open their children's bedroom door, they see all sorts of paraphernalia spinning throughout the room. As they gaze in horror, records twirl around, books fly towards them, and a light bulb places itself into a lamp by itself. Although this scene should be scary, it feels like it was only put together to show off these gimmicky visuals. Not only that, the camera lingers on every shot, making the stop motion and green screen painfully obvious. Because this scene doesn't add anything to the story, it feels self-serving. Also, did we really need to see a floating Hulk action figure riding a toy horse? Number 9. Total Recall. The CGI in Terminator 2 was so awesome, people forget Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in another film that pushed the boundaries of special effects the previous year, Total Recall. Paul Verhoeven's sci-fi thriller has some of the best animatronics ever put to screen. The X-ray sequence looks stunning even though computer effects were in their infancy at the time. Ironically, what was once regarded as Total Recall's best visual effect is now perceived as the worst one. In one scene, Double Agent Quaid attempts to sneak through the immigration office on Mars by disguising himself in a hyper-realistic woman's costume. When the outfit malfunctions, the woman's head splits open, revealing Quaid. Well, it's supposed to be Quaid. In reality, it's an unconvincing dummy head of Arnie. Upon watching this scene for the first time, most people don't realize how fake this puppet looks because they're distracted by the woman's head disconnecting, which still looks amazing. But when you clock Arnie's paper-mache-looking noggin, it ruins this iconic scene. His eyes aren't even symmetrical. Also, why did this shot need a dummy head? Surely the real Arnold could have been behind the animatronic or something. Number 8. The Matrix Reloaded. The hype for The Matrix Reloaded was so overwhelming, there was no way the Wachowskis' sequel could live up to the expectations. And it didn't. The expository dialogue was repetitive, the performances were flat, the pacing was all over the place, and the ending was anticlimactic. But there was one element that received universal praise: the visuals. Even though the bullet time technique popularized by The Matrix was groundbreaking, many believe the CGI in Reloaded was just as good, if not better. The harshest critics couldn't fault the VFX, especially during the burly brawl where Neo faces off against 100 Agent Smiths. However, the overuse of CGI is blatant if you rewatch the iconic fight now. While Neo batters the snarling agents, there's many shots where every character is obviously computer generated. What's more annoying is that this problem could have been remedied if the scene didn't contain slow motion. By slowing down the action, Neo's rubbery texture and Smith's copy and paste faces are more flagrant. The choreography looks fantastic, but the fight starts resembling a cartoon once the actors are swapped out for their digital doppelgangers. Number 7. Tron Legacy. Tron Legacy failed to win critics over, nor did it make a splash at the box office. However, the long-awaited sequel was commended for its kaleidoscopic visuals, especially during the light cycle chases. But in hindsight, some of the visuals aren't up to par. The main villain, Clue, is a digital program designed to resemble Jeff Bridges' character in his 30s. Because Bridges was 61 during filming, the creative team utilized the same de-aging tech used for Brad Pitt in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Sadly, Clue is rendered so badly you swear the effects team did it on purpose. Now, you could argue that the de-aging technology wasn't perfected yet. However, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button has superior effects despite coming out 2 years earlier. The difference is the production team behind Benjamin Button knew the technology's limitations and obscured the titular character when he was de-aged. But Tron Legacy shows off Clue in all his glory, making no effort to hide how unfinished he looked. When you see the de-aging effects in films like Captain Marvel, Gemini Man, and Spider-Man No Way Home, Clue is embarrassing by comparison. Number 6. Spawn. Even though CGI was considered to be potentially gimmicky at first, everything changed in 1999. After the release of The Matrix, The Phantom Menace, and The Mummy that year, moviegoers finally understood this groundbreaking technology was here to stay. However, people forget the superhero flick Spawn predates all those movies. Released in 1997, Todd McFarlane's comic book adaptation was one of the first films with fully computer-generated characters. Although critics loathed it, the special effects were regarded as Spawn's only positive quality. But when you watch it now, it seems inconceivable that anyone thought these visuals looked good. And it's not just one specific visual. All the CGI is terrible. Spawn's billowing cape is so appallingly rendered, you wonder why the crew didn't just make a real one. Because the actors can't see the cape, they have no reference point while looking at Spawn, making the visual even less believable. But that's not all. 22 digital companies worked for 11 months to design the Hell Dimension, and yet it looks like it was cobbled together in 5, maybe 6 minutes. But the worst aspect of the film's VFX has to be Hell's ruler, Malebolgia. This demon looks so incomplete because, well, he is. The visual team ran out of time before fine-tuning Malebolgia's design, so they didn't get a chance to make his mouth move when he talks. Number 5. Hulk. Just because a special effect looks bad doesn't mean the visual artist didn't work their arse off putting it together, and few films exemplify this fact better than Ang Lee's Hulk. This film was in development hell for 12 years, since the studio had to wait until they believed CGI had advanced enough to bring the mean green machine to life. During production, 180 technicians worked round the clock for 18 months to ensure the Hulk looked like a real creature, rather than a computer-generated image. Because 2.5 million hours went into creating the Jade Giant's movements, hair, muscles, and facial expressions, you'd expect the final product to be out of this world. Although the Hulk was impressive in 2003, the emerald-skinned monster pales when he's compared to his MCU counterpart. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Hulk was brought to life with motion capture, making his movements far more realistic, especially in his face. But since the Hulk in this movie is a pure CGI creation, it moves unnaturally, even cartoonishly most of the time. Although most of the visuals have aged terribly, don't get me started on that mutant dog, the titular hero definitely looks the worst. Number 4. The Terminator. With the Terminator's exemplary visuals, gritty action, and beautiful score, no one can contest this film is sci-fi at its best. Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance may be iconic, but that shouldn't take away from the blood, sweat, and tears that Stan Winston put into the special effects. Despite having little money and even less time, Winston's creations in the movie turned out flawlessly. Well, most of them. After the Terminator sustains heavy damage, he performs surgery on his face, exposing his metallic interior and laser eye. The puppet of Arnie's face took 6 months to construct, and yet it looks slightly more convincing than a melted mannequin by today's standards. But that's not all. Director James Cameron worried that using stop motion for the T-800 would be unconvincing. Sadly, he was spot on. When the endoskeleton is a puppet, it looks brilliant, but when it switches to the janky stop motion model, you can tell the Terminator isn't really there. Even though these visuals looked astounding in the 1980s, the superior special effects in Terminator 2 utterly put them to shame. Although people debate which movie is superior, there is no question that the sequel is superior when it comes to visuals. Number 3. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within was a massive deal upon its release, since it was the first CGI film with photorealistic characters. It took so long to make the visuals look right, the development team had to redo the earliest visuals again to ensure they were on par with the latest rendered shots. After all the animation was completed, the footage was fed to a separate render farm, where the textures were sharpened further. It may have been an exhausting process, but it was worth it in the end, since the visuals in The Spirits Within were considered indistinguishable from real life. People got so hyped by the movie's animation, there were rumours that digital performers could become commonplace in cinema. There was also speculation that the Spirits Within protagonist Aki could appear in other movies alongside real actors. But if you put the photorealistic characters beside actual people, it's clear the special effects aren't as seamless as they first appeared. This is demonstrated on the DVD bonus feature when Aki interacts with the film crew. The visuals on the characters' facial expressions are excellent, but it's clear the technology had yet to perfect certain features such as eyes, teeth, and hair, making most characters look soulless and creepy. Number 2. The Lawn Mower Man. The Lawn Mower Man was torn apart by pretty much everyone when it came out. It also didn't help that Stephen King sued the studio, forcing them to remove his name from the title. The trippy sci-fi flick was criticised for its wooden performances, slow pace, and the done-to-death Frankenstein plot. But there was one element that the harshest disparager couldn't fault. The psychotropic visuals were truly awe-inspiring. Because the story centres around virtual technology that can enhance the human mind, the filmmakers injected the movie with as much psychedelic effects as they could. Even though the film was badly received, these kaleidoscopic images were regarded as mesmerising and dazzling. Critics from Empire magazine went so far as to call these computer-generated displays genuinely visionary. But the years have been unkind to the Lawn Mower Man. When you look at the VR scenes now, you would think they were from a 1980s movie or a Sega Saturn game. Even though these variegated sequences were once perceived as the Lawn Mower Man's only redeeming feature, they are now viewed as the film's most glaring flaw. Number 1. Star Wars: The Original Trilogy Special Edition. Do you know what the saddest thing is about the Star Wars Special Edition trilogy? Originally, it actually sounded like a great idea. Even though the visuals in George Lucas's work were light years ahead of every movie in its heyday, some special effects have aged very badly. So when Lucas announced he would re-release the Star Wars movies with refined effects, added CGI, unseen footage, and newly recorded dialogue, fans were over the moon. And when you first watched the Special Edition versions, it was nice to see fully rendered CG characters rather than an amateur-looking puppet or a crummy animatronic. But when you look at these sequences now, the computer-generated imagery feels forced and jarring. What's most infuriating is how the majority of these effects are utterly redundant. Why was there a music number in Return of the Jedi? Did we need to see a stormtrooper ride a dewback? And why did Lucas feel obligated to insert more rocks in the scene where R2-D2 hides from Jawas? The only good thing that came about this experiment is that movies should be left untouched, even if they seem outdated.